Hey, so this is part two where we go over the questions you had about my rankings. Thank you to all of you that shared your rankings, asked questions, participated. It's appreciated. Otherwise, I would just be doing nothing here. I'd be staring at the camera for 5 minutes and be like, okay, that was that. That was that. Real fast, somebody, uh, Eric K, had tweeted me message with this video, Stop Ranking Kanye Albums. And this is the ultimate conclusion that when you're comparing the albums, you're comparing apples to oranges. So if you want a really good video that kind of gets over the pointlessness of trying to rank Kanye albums, this is definitely the video that goes over it. And does so in a clever way, a funny way. Um, I'm very much a fan of how whoever this is, Alpho, laid it out. So it's pretty funny. He said one of the things that you can look at a bunch of other artists and the rankings of their best albums is pretty definitive. But when you look at Kanye albums, it's all over the fucking place. And that's the power to Kanye. So I just thought that was a nice starter for everything. And then getting into the questions y'all had and answering those. First up, Michael asked, what is the college dropout not doing that the Life of Pablo and Yeezus does do? It's personally my favorite album, but Yeezus is second. So we used to say a lot more that Kanye had developed as a narrative artist over time. The same way that you'd maybe see a quarterback develop over time, a writer, a film director, a basketball player. Like, I typically like to compare it to LeBron James's development. Like, if you look at LeBron James for the first 5 years he's in the league, he's playing with this pure athleticism and energy that was incredible, but it wasn't the most refined game possible. And then you look at LeBron by the time that he's at the end of his first Cavs run and goes to the Heat, and that LeBron was just so dominant because he had such an understanding of the game at that level that the early years of LeBron didn't have. And that time period with the Heat was insane. But as he comes back to the Cavs and enters in that other period of his career, it's less just the beastly athleticism and more this really fine-tuned, just surgical game that's at the highest level of basketball that he's been performing at. And it's so different. Some people are really going to appreciate the early raw energy days of LeBron. Other people are going to appreciate the game that's maybe less explosive, but has more of that cerebral quality to it, where you're just like, who the fuck else is going to be able to do what he just did there with that pass or that like anticipation? So we tended to group Kanye albums in that way. That early on, Kanye hadn't developed all of the narrative techniques and storytelling ability that we would see him utilize in future albums. One of the things that we talk about a lot is this idea of form and function, where you look at, how do I want to frame it? Like, if you want to show chaotic thoughts in a character in a story that you're writing or something, you might go into stream of conscious writing to show the jumbled, like, angsty thoughts of that character. And you may have a lot of run-on sentences on the page. It's harder to read and less pretty to read, but you're making the form of your writing convey the function of the thing, which is this character is insane. Kanye starts doing that in his later albums with the soundscape, where you actually have the soundscape inhabiting or in service to what the character is doing. We think about it a lot as film scores, right? The music in a movie is not decoupled from the movie itself. It's not to be the most appealing thing possible, the coolest thing possible. The music in a movie is usually in service to the emotion of the scene. So if the scene is supposed to be intense or scary, the music fits that in that way. So the form of the thing serves the function of the thing. A lot of what we talk about with college dropout, late registration, graduation, is that the form is less involved with the function of the song, right? Like Jesus Walks, doesn't necessarily have the tension dynamic that you might see on a later track on Kanye's discography. I'm trying to think of an example to that. Like Hold My Liquor. So on Yeezus with Hold My Liquor, Kanye wants to convey the tension between kind of the vulnerable angel on one shoulder and the more egotistical, worried what people think devil on the other shoulder. And he does that by having Justin Vernon convey this vulnerability and Chief Keef convey this ego. And having those two both intro the song serves this tension that's a central theme on the album. And that tension between the internal vulnerable voice and the external, like, braggadocio, angrier, egotistical voice, he explores on Hold My Liquor, I'm In It, Guilt Trip, Send It Up, Bound 2. Like, there's such a concern with how people view you on Yeezus. And that's what these other voices represent. Assassin, King Louis, who's the other one? Chief Keef, with Justin Vernon and Kid Cudi and Beanie Man representing more of this internal vulnerability. So you really see that dynamic play out, where I don't think you necessarily see any of that form and function work going on College Dropout. Kanye, for the form of the song, is more concerned with what sounds good, what's going to get me radio play, what's going to get me attention, what's going to make people put this on and just want to listen to this, rather than how is this in service to the artistic point I'm making with this album, right? So he still does really clever things, and that's not to say that this is somehow worse production. It's just apples and oranges, right? So somebody that really wants the apples will really much rather appreciate College Dropout, not much rather, but would get more from College Dropout, Late Registration, Graduation than their experience with Yeezus, The Life of Pablo, Yay, Kids See Ghosts. That's one of the things that people talked about with Yeezus. Early on, and still, people will say that it's all over the place, it doesn't flow well, it's disjointed, but you look at the album cover, like, let's just look at the album cover. God, it's so small. It's so small. But you look at the album cover and it says, which one, which one, which one, which one. That's posing a question between two things. I can have this or that. And on the album cover, we have two photos. Oh, go figure. What a coincidence. Not a coincidence. This is purposeful artistic shit. And one is a big booty model, and the other is a family at a wedding. Like, they convey two very different things. One is commitment and faith and family. The other is celebrity indulgence, sex, sin. And that's what we see on the album. You have Father Stretch My Hands, Part 1, which has this beautiful soundscape to it, contrasted with Father Stretch My Hands Part 2, which is a much darker, dire soundscape. We have Part 1, where there's all this kind of high, happy emotion, followed by Part 2, which is very stark, and he's admitting all of these fears that he has. And then he retreats into Designer's Pandaverse, where he just tries to soothe himself through materialism, much in the same way that he brings in Assassin and Chief Keef on Yeezus. And then you get Famous, which has more of this bouncy energy, like, I'm trying to enjoy my fame, like, yeah, followed by Feedback, which is just, shit, like, this fame is really creating this feedback, because feedback sucks. It can be critical, like if you're looking at the feedback to how you're behaving, but it also gets at the sound in the microphone, that piercing feedback sound. And that's why Feedback, the soundscape of the song, is so weird and kind of ugly, because that's the thing that Kanye is trying to convey. You get this dynamic playing out all the way up through Waves. And you look at the first verse of Waves, and the first verse is that ego, that ugliness, that I'm gonna fuck your girl wants me, let's fucking fight, followed by a return to consciousness, which this is the song that comes after I Love Kanye, where he talks about the old Kanye and the new Kanye, and missing this Kanye that was more vulnerable, more poetic, more soulful, compared to this Kanye now that we've seen play out on the album, who's very aggressive and consumed with the celebrity life, who in a song about his family starts saying shit about like, I need every bad bitch up in Equinox. I need to see right now if you're a freak or not. I need to find out right now if you're a freak or not. Like, it's supposed to be about his family, and it just goes to sex with other women and that sexual concern, which is this tension right here on the cover. Like, he's trying to think about family, and these thoughts keep interfering, and he has to decide which one. And it's on Waves that we finally see this mindset get replaced by this mindset, which is why FML follows it, and why Real Friends follows that, because he's looking at his life and the ruins of the relationships, because he's been so focused on the celebrity life and realizing that the only people he has are Kim and his kids, that family is what matters, and everybody else has just become a wolf because of his celebrity lifestyle. So the album's doing all this shit, and the soundscape backs it up in a way that I don't necessarily think is happening on College Dropout, despite all the cool stuff soundscape-wise that College Dropout is doing. Like, to me, the spaceship beat is just an awesome beat, but I don't know if it's necessarily having a form and function relationship like we see on Yikes, All Mine, Wouldn't Leave, I Thought About Killing You, Kids See Ghosts. Jesus Walks does some cool things, and it has that sample of the Jesus Walks, which is awesome, but I don't know if the soundscape is really operating on the same dynamic level that we see other tracks that Kanye eventually makes in the future. But these all sound fucking awesome in a way that those later tracks don't, because these are designed for that like mainstream enjoyment and listening and just that pure soundscape beauty, where the other songs aren't going for that. And then in that way, there's less intercontextuality on College Dropout, though as we've returned in our podcast to doing the line-by-line analysis of College Dropout, we're finding that there's more intercontextuality than we had been claiming for a few years now, which I feel bad about. So intercontextuality, just to preface that, it's kind of like in a movie where each scene adds up, right? So the opening scenes and opening actions have context that interacts with later scenes. So you don't watch scenes in a movie and think of them as not mattering to one another. That would be weird, right? In that way, it's kind of like, I don't know, the plot of House of Cards has nothing to do with the plot of The Simpsons. But every episode of House of Cards has that intercontextuality between it. So one of the things that I really enjoy is that intercontextuality on albums, which is what you typically get from a narrative album, which is what Kanye delivers from Graduation up through Kids See Ghosts, but isn't quite doing as much on College Dropout and Late Registration. And for someone that geeks out over that kind of stuff, that's why College Dropout and Late Registration just end up lower, because they're not doing as much of that. It's the same reason why Ye is a little lower than other albums, because while Ye is doing so much, I prefer maximal rather than minimal. And just by that alone, it goes a little lower. Where if I preferred minimal over maximal, or did it give a fuck about intercontextuality, my rankings would look much, much, much different. But I do want to point out, you look at College Dropout, and you have the intro, which is, you know, Kanye do this song for the kids. We Don't Care really gets at, this is our experience, and like kind of fuck you. Which gets Kanye kicked out of school, and All Falls Down marks this transition. As we see in the first verse, this girl goes from being in school, not knowing what she wants to do, kind of leaving school, just doing hair, and getting caught up in the consumerism of our current social situation, where she just wants to buy things because buying things makes her feel better. And Kanye then gets into the second verse about why buying things makes us feel better, but the trap that is, gets into that in the third verse. He makes a lot of clever references to a Biggie song, and also with the Lauryn Hill interpolation that's on the album, and the song that comes back to, or that's on that track, and how that relates to Lauryn Hill's track, which is about injustice, I think. But this is really All Falls Down, the first time Kanye went after the mental prison that we find ourselves in the 21st century because of consumerism, which he would go on to talk more about on New Slaves, Pinocchio Story, there was one more, St. Pablo. And then in 2018, in his speeches and tweets, he really went in on that. But it traces all the way back to All Falls Down. But one of the cool things here is Kanye points out this trap of consumerism and how it brings you down. And he follows that up with a song about I'll Fly Away, which in the religious context is kind of about going to join God, which is death. You know, one day that you'll go to heaven and everything will be okay. But he turns that into a anthem for escaping the situation that you're in with Spaceship, which is about working this dead-end job, but you're trying to make it to this next level, make it out of this place that you're in, where you're part of a system, a cog in the system, just kind of losing your time in your life to something you don't care about when you have this ability and talent to break out and do something more. And we see Kanye, GLC, and Consequence all in that situation striving for something more. They want to go upwards. They want that spaceship to take them away. So you have one song that talks about the dynamics of our social setup, our culture bringing us down, followed by your internal drive and passion pulling you up, while also getting into some religious elements with I'll Fly Away and the outro from Tony Williams. That then sets up Jesus Walks, which is about the tension between the devil trying to bring you down and God being able to save you and show you a path upward to something better. So Kanye takes very real world elements of consumerism and dreams and then transitions them into biblical proportions of Jesus and the devil and the war between them, which is absolutely incredible thing to do. And he follows that up, that tension of like, you know, Jesus, can you save me? In the first verse, he paints that kind of sinner life and the life he had been living with the devil influencing him and breaking him down. And in the second verse, it's kind of, okay, this is what happens when I walk with God. When Jesus walks with me, these are the things that are possible. And the song ends with him still hoping that God will show him a way. The next song is Never Let Me Down. So you just had this flow of songs that are so directional and so clearly at the tension of going up or down. And then you have Never Let Me Down, which is about this ascension. And all of that is so fucking beautiful and so well done, which is kind of that early Flash LeBron, where you're seeing what his game could really turn into. But then the middle portion tends to be less dynamic, I think, in a way, as Get 'em High, new workout plans, slow jams, breathe in, breathe out, school spirits, the skits, Little Jimmy. These all really get into social dynamics that are more fun and carefree, partying, trying to get with girls. It's more, just carefree in a way, but I think it kind of drops the ball in some ways in that kind of dramatic narrative that we had just been building in that first portion. And, you know, maybe as we do our podcast episodes and go through it, my mind will change on that. But to me, I just kind of view it as somebody that started strong with this concept and then wasn't quite able to continue through with it. And then by the time you get to two words, Through the Wire, Family Business, that intercontextuality that was so tight in those first 8 tracks isn't there quite as strongly. It's harder to maybe try to piece together how those relate. And then you get Last Call, which pays off on Spaceship and Jesus Walks and Never Let Me Down in this way that he's ascended, he's made it, and you could kind of make the argument with Through the Wire doing that as well. But I just don't think it's as well done, strongly done, complete, deep as we see with the future albums, just because Kanye, as good as he was here, only got better over time. So that's why for me, this ends up where it ends up at number 8. And that was my really long answer to just the first question. But hopefully that covered a lot of questions that people may have had. So Seamus gave his list, and then said Paul Thomas Anderson is my favorite director. Awesome. One of mine as well. Just reading through some of these comments. I do find it interesting that there is conversation about when did you start listening to Kanye and how that impacts if somebody is more new Kanye or old Kanye. I know there's always people that break the mold on that. There's people that have been listening to Kanye for forever and love the newer stuff. There's people that just got into him and love the older stuff. But it really does seem to be something that people like to investigate and see. Like, when did you start listening? I really became a fan of Kanye, in 2008 with 808s and Heartbreak. Graduation played a lot my sophomore year of college, junior year of college. Stronger was playing every Friday night, every Saturday night, every Thursday night in our basement on multiple times throughout the evening. It was just on the playlist of like 20 tracks that just repeated. But it wasn't until 808s that I was just like, Jesus, what's this Kanye guy? What an amazing man. Excuse me, sir, you put Kids See Ghosts and Watch the Throne in your thumbnail and then failed to rank them. Thomas, you are correct. I did do that. I was being lazy. How dare I? Please illuminate your rankings further, as I know not your feelings on Watch the Throne, especially. Also, Cruel Summer, I guess. I don't know. Cold is a dope song. Cold is a dope song. I would put Cruel Summer. So just a reminder of my list. It was 8, 7, 6, 5, Ye at 4, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy at 3, Yeezus at 2, and Life of Pablo at 1, but those two flip-flop a lot. If I'm adding Cruel Summer, it goes beneath College Dropout. It has a lot of cool moments, but I just don't think as an album, like, as much as I just went in on College Dropout not having intercontextuality, despite as much as it has, Cruel Summer has none of that. And so for me, it ends up at the bottom. Watch the Throne. Ooh, I think it ends up either above Late Registration or above Graduation. There's some songs that I absolutely adore on it, like No Church in the Wilds, Otis, Paris, Why I Love You, Welcome to the Jungle. That's My Bitch. I love so much on it, and that album was so important to me when it came out. It really defined my summer and fall of that year, just the last half of 2011. And I think the soundscape of it is so cool and dynamic that just listenability-wise, it starts to go over Late Registration and Graduation, but it has less of that context and intercontextuality that I really love. So it's somewhere in there. I don't really have a definitive place for it right now. I think if you were going to like press me, like knife to me, gun to me, I'd put it above College Dropout, beneath Late Registration, or maybe, yeah. It's hard. I think there. But I could be talked into putting it higher at the same time. Fuck. And then Kids See Ghosts, I think, ends up with Ye. Kind of tied. And that might seem like a cop-out in just a bit, but again, the size of it makes it less than albums that are more maximal, despite Kids See Ghost, I think, soundscape-wise, doing more than what Ye's doing. Like, there's something about Kids See Ghost that feels larger to me than what it is. But at the same time, it doesn't have My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Yeezus, Life of Pablo largeness to it. But we do like to talk about the fact that Ye and Kids See Ghost seem to be related albums, with Ye being the external journey that Kanye's going on, thinking about how his actions happen in the public realm and how they affect people and what they look like, where Kids See Ghosts is this very internal journey and is kind of what he's feeling inside as he's going through the journey that he's going through on Ye. So it's almost like you can see those both being consequential to each other. Like, Feel the Love inspires I Thought About Killing You. I Thought About Killing You inspires Feel the Love. The albums have the same 3-1-3 structure in that Ye, the first 3 tracks are the darkest thoughts, and then you have Would It Leave as a pivot point, and the last 3 tracks are the beautiful thoughts that came out of the darkness. On Kids See Ghosts, the first 3 tracks are really when you're stuck in the ghosts. That, these demons, the things that haunt you, the darker thoughts that leave you suicidal, upset, acting out, which we get kind of that sense of acting out in Ego from Pusha T on Feel the Love and Kanye's verse on Fire. And it kind of crescendos on Fourth Dimension when they take DMT, I think it is, and you get the weird trippiness that's happening there. This drug-fueled vision where you get elves and a jester, and then you get Free, which is the tipping point, like Would It Leave is, and you follow that tipping point with an ascendancy. Reborn, Kids See Ghosts, and Cuddy Montage are all post-ghost world. They mastered their environment, and they're finding themselves able to function because they're building this relationship inside themselves with God. And the light that God brings helps them kind of banish the ghosts and the darkness in their life. And that same loss of darkness is what we see on Ye, except Kanye constantly relates it on Ye to everybody outside of him and his connections with the public, with women, with his wife, with Drake on No Mistakes, with society on a whole, where Kids See Ghosts is this internal relationship with God and his own demons and ghosts and depression and fighting through that. So I think if you're going to make the argument, which we will eventually make in much stronger terms, that you should read Ye and Kids See Ghosts as one album, then that shit becomes, I think, top for me. And then you would listen, I think, like 1-1, 2-2, 3-3. So, like, I Thought About Killing You, I Can Feel the Love, Yikes and Fire, All Mine and Fourth Dimension, Wouldn't Leave and Free. With that, like, that has that maximalism that I want, but I think that's a hard sell for a lot of people, and it's something that we're just going to have to reiterate and defend and argue for over and over and over again until maybe people start to see that as being more true than not true, which is something that we really had to do with Yeezus and Life of Pablo, and Ye and Kids See Ghosts even having a narrative itself. I'm pretty sure we were the first people to break the 3-1-3 structure of those albums, and we've been major, I think, contributors to the idea of what the narrative of Yeezus and the Life of Pablo is. And just as a reminder, we wrote a whole fucking book on Yeezus going over the narrative. So we'll write a book on those albums one day. So Kids See Ghosts on its own would tie with Ye because I see them as, two albums, two sides of the same coin. But if you combine those albums into one body of work, especially because Ghost Town Part 1 and Ghost Town Part 2 kind of unites the albums as a bridge, right? There's so many arguments I want to make in favor of this theory. Please don't think I'm crazy. With that in mind, yeah, it definitely would jump to 1 in my rankings, just because that would be some monstrous album that has this dual nature to it that's insane. Like, this whole other level of artistry. I would say with that being done that way, it's as like cohesively enjoyable a listening experience as something like College Dropout or Late Registration or My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. But boy, is it going for some insane things in that way. So yeah, that's where those would rank. More lists. 808s at 1. What is up here? So My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy at 1, 808s at 1, College Dropout at 1, Life of Pablo at 1, Dark Fantasy. Excuse me. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy again. Please go in depth into why College Dropout is so low. It's my favorite. I hope I answered that with the first question. If you have any follow-up to that, any more questions, I can answer those. My favorite tracks on College Dropout, in case that's a question, I think it goes Last Call, 2 words, Spaceship, All Falls Down, and then the rest kind of cycle through, mostly just depending on what I'm listening to at that moment. But my absolute favorite's Last Call. I go back to Last Call all the time. I listen to it all the way through all the time. That song's incredible. What else do we got? Did the rankings change from the first video? So Masuda is referring to, I think, the intro video that I made, like My Story, Welcome to the Channel. I talk about how I became a Kanye fan, and I do think the albums have shifted since I made that video. At that time, oh God, I think I was putting Graduation above 808s at that point, but I've kind of been on an 808s resurgence, so it's gone back ahead. I often flip-flop Graduation and 808s when I make the rankings, and I think Life of Pablo was below Yeezus at that point. And Late Registration might have been under College Dropout at that point, but over the course of doing our podcast, the strong concept behind Late Registration won the day, which I think is part of a question somebody asked. But yeah, the rankings changed a little bit. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy again. I think Late Registration and College Dropout should be higher. My personal list, you know? This isn't my objective list of what is the best album. Mainly because it speaks a lot more to Kanye coming up and the Black experience. Yeah, I think there really is something cool about how College Dropout and Late Registration capture Kanye's ascent into celebrity. Especially because when you look at the albums, Graduation is a loss of innocence tale, right? Like Stand By Me or The Sandlots or what's another one? I keep just thinking of like baseball movies, Angels in the Outfield, Little Big League, where you just have your innocence lost by the end. And you kind of enter into adulthood for the first time or see the world differently through more adult eyes than at the start of the story. So Graduation, you start off with Kanye kind of like being like, okay, I'm out in the real world. I'm a celebrity now. And he gets to enjoy that with Good Morning, Champion. And then you go into Stronger. And on Stronger, he really gets his first taste of the indulgence that celebrity offers. And following that, we get I Wonder, where he thinks about, should I leave Chicago and everything I've known and go off into superstardom and really pursue that life? And the answer is yes. He ends this relationship, which that's the metaphor of the relationship on I Wonder, with Chicago to go pursue everything that he wants to pursue, which is why the next song's Good Life, and we get city after city after city on Good Life, just because so much of this album is building up to Homecoming, where he goes back to Chicago saying like, look, I became a superstar, I'm representing you. And Chicago's like, yeah, but you left, like, and you can't come home again in that way. Like, you're the superstar Kanye now, you're not Chicago's Kanye West, which is this really bittersweet thing. And that's followed up with Big Brother as well, where Big Brother, Kanye starts with this innocence, gets in with Jay, and starts getting bigger and bigger, and he and Jay start competing, and then he pisses Jay off and has to try to apologize and make amends. There's something about the increase in fame leading to conflict, which creates tension in a relationship. And that's why we see after Good Life the ramping up of the ego and the indulgence in celebrity life, from Can't Tell Me Nothing to Barry Bonds to Drunken Hot Girls, Flashing Lights, Everything I Am, which, Can't Tell Me Nothing is like, yo, I have this ego. You can't tell me nothing. I'm going to do what I want to do. I've made it. I'm living this good life. And Everything I Am is kind of this justification of that. Like, yeah, you know what? Everything that I've like fucked up, but everything that I've done like has gotten me to this place. Like, everything I'm not's made me everything I am. And he achieves the glory following that. So despite the fucked up behavior we see on display in these songs, Kanye still reaches this celebrity glory and gets to indulge in it and revel in it and embrace it. And when he comes back to Chicago trying to bring that same energy, that's when he's told he can't come back home, and understands that he's lost something in the pursuit of fame. And it's really a bitter realization, as his fame has now divided him from the thing that motivated him and that he drew strength from. So all of that's so fucking cool. And we've started appreciating that even more. I don't know how I got onto that. Oh, Kanye coming up. Yeah. So then you see like that transition to Now I'm Famous lead to 808s and Heartbreak, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Yeezus, Life of Pablo, Yay, which were all deconstructing how awful it is to be famous. But there's still a journey going on those albums. It's awesome. Kanye's discography is like watching a movie or reading like Game of Thrones, and each novel or each album is a different novel in the series, and the characters escalating into what they're getting into. Like, what, 808s, you get introduced to like I'll Never Have a Significant Other, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, the hopelessness of the romantic situation because of the celebrity lifestyle. Then Yeezus, you finally get the introduction of this woman that could save him. And Life of Pablo, he has to throw away the rest of fame in order to make this relationship work. And then Yay, he finally sheds that and commits himself to his wife and has this beautiful journey. It's so cool. Anyway, a lot more about the Black experience. That's actually something we did a live show at South by Southwest this past year, and it was awesome. So many people came out. If you were one of those people, thank you. If you want to come out, I think we'll be there in the 2019 South by Southwest. You just need a badge for South by Southwest, but I think we'll be doing another live show. And there was a architect there, Michael Ford, who, when we gave our rankings of albums, me and Travis are both very white. I come from a small town in Ohio of 5,000 people, middle-class family. My dad worked at Ford in inventory, counting parts every night, worked the night shift. My mom was a professor of biology at Kent State University. Travis's parents are both like blue collar. But it's still a very different experience, right? And when we both ranked College Dropout at the bottom, Michael raised his hand and asked us, he said, do you think it's at the bottom for you because it's Kanye's blackest album? It has the most about the Black experience. It has the most in terms of the Black soundscape, especially with that soul, all the soul samples on it. And it was a really good question. And I think that that's really one of the highlights of Kanye's early discography, is how it speaks to that experience. And it's not something that you necessarily get as much on the later albums, though it's still something that Kanye talks about and brings perspective to on other albums. It's not quite, I don't know, I guess as relatable when it's fame, right? Where this is struggling to come up, and that through the Black experience is much more, I guess, communal or relatable to a lot of people. And I think it's something that myself, Travis, many other people maybe don't connect with in a way that does affect our ranking of the album. And I can't do much about that, but I feel like it's definitely something I need to acknowledge and be aware of. And it could be a factor in it, but I definitely feel like, I don't know, the album provides me something and just how it views the world that I haven't gotten from a lot of other albums. And I don't know. I appreciate a lot about it in that way. I never knock it for anything like that. But it's also an aspect of the album that I may not relate to. Then we get College Dropout 1 here. All of his albums are good, and a lot of time my opinion changes, but overall, this is it. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. I used to feel really bad for putting LR and TCD so low, but why apologize for liking what I like? Yeah, I feel the same way. We're comparing 8 masterpieces anyway. Very much so. Life of Pablo Forever. Ramen Bootleg Diver puts My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy at number 1. You can check out the full explanation about why they ranked the albums as they did. Alec had My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy at 1. At the South by Southwest show, we talked about the diversity and appreciation for Kanye albums. I was like, watch this, watch this. How many people here think College Dropout's the best album? And a few raised their hands. And I was like, Late Registration, a few. And a few, I mean like a few, like 2 or 3 or 4. And then I eventually got to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and like 90% of the room raised their hand. And I was like, okay, never mind. Like, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy still often reigns supreme, but at the same time, there's still a diverse appreciation, which we even see here. College Dropout being ranked at top, College Dropout, a lot of College Dropout. Y'all tripping. The College Dropout has my favorite skits, songs, and message from all the albums. I love every single one of his albums, but I think I could listen to College Dropout every single day for the rest of my life and look forward to it. I also could do that. And the ranking it at the bottom has nothing to do with how much I love it. It just, I love other things just a little teensy bit more. Great list. My list is exact the same, except Life of Pablo and Yeezus are swapped. I included Kids See Ghosts above My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Does Ye's reception play into your rank as well? So Bound 2 had said, I feel kind of bad for Ye being so low, but to add on to what you said about it, the minimalism on top of my frustration with the public perception takes it down a bit. I don't think the reception plays into my rank. I do get really annoyed by it. I actually just got into a discussion with the editor-in-chief of a publication, a very popular music outlet, where they were asking me what I thought was missing in their coverage of Kanye in 2018. And I cited that they had a few articles that really took Kanye to task, as if everything he was saying and doing was abominable, wrong, dangerous. One of the articles was like, Kanye West has... One of the articles just talked about how Kanye no longer had any part of who he was in him today. That what we're seeing from Kanye in 2018 is a complete anomaly from the man that we had grown up with or used to listen to, which is just absurd to me for a lot of reasons, many of which I've made videos about. But one of the things that got brought up was your coverage of Ye was just very negative. And if you are wondering what you were missing, you're missing the perspective of somebody that appreciated the album, that liked the music, the soundscape, the narrative, that found beauty in it, that found artistic value in it. You didn't have anything from anybody like that, which is why Kanye fans may have looked at the coverage that you did from just what Kanye was doing himself, but also the albums, and not want to fuck with your coverage or content. And his response was just like, none of our editors liked it, and when it's bad music, we're not going to placate the artist. We just have to tell it how it is. I was like, well, that's not how it is. That's your view of it, but you're asking me what was missing, and that's what was missing, the view of somebody else that doesn't think that way about it. So I do get really frustrated by the coverage of Ye. I think it's very much, though, like 808s, or the critical reception of Yeezus was positive, but public reception was really mixed. And over time, that's gone away. More and more people have found value in Yeezus, appreciate Yeezus. And Life of Pablo was the same. It had a bit more critical up and down, or more people not liking it than, say, Yeezus or My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy or even any of the previous albums. But I think as the years have passed, more and more people have started to appreciate the sound of it and gotten used to the sound being maybe a little ahead of its time in the way a lot of Kanye albums are. And that it's starting to trend better. I think we're going to see the same thing with Ye, especially as the conversation about what Ye's doing artistically aligns with the conversation what Kids See Ghosts is doing artistically. And I hope that will improve. It doesn't play into my rank, though I am very annoyed with everything. It does leave a bad taste in my mouth as well. Calypso had Yeezus. All 8 albums are good. I rank them as I do for different reasons. Could agree more with your assessment that pretty much any ranking of Kanye is over. I don't know how to say that word. Could be justified. Daniel, first, do you think you could also give us your list of every Kanye song from worst to best? We're slowly doing that with our rankings at the end of every podcast episode. We've covered 100 songs out of, I think, like 120 some. Or maybe it's less than that, like 115, 110, something. And I have that compiled. It needs updated because it's not quite accurate. I shared that on Twitter, and people were just going the fuck off. One of the reasons why is because I thought about Killing You at number 1, because that song's doing so many of the things that I love, and I love it. I love it. It's my number 1, but people really had trouble with that. So I hope you're okay with my favorite song. Not my case that it's the best Kanye song ever, but it's just my personal favorite song. At the moment, it can change. But we'll post that list eventually. Also, I would argue that the thematic material of Late Registration makes it conceptually just as good as the narratives in Kanye's later albums, and it is, to me, the most consistency of Kanye's career. So what do you like about Late Registration? So Late Registration's cool. One of the things that jumped out to us as we started doing our episodes on it was the concept of time. From the title, Late Registration, getting at the idea of time. You know, you're late to do something. And heard him say, you get nothing's ever promised tomorrow, today, with that emphasis on the different times, tomorrow and today, and the idea of something being promised at a later portion and the arrival of that promise. And you see time be a major factor in a lot of the songs and what's being talked about. And that could seem random if you were just, I don't know, 1 or 2 songs. Like, oh, that's coincidental. Every song has time if you think about it. But it's such a key component to this album and seems to pervade the album so much that it really does seem to be, I think, Kanye's first concept album. In the same way that 808s and Heartbreak kind of looks at that sadness and heartbreak, or Kids See Ghosts is a narrative, but also this concept of dealing with your demons and really exploring your demons. And you get that soundscape carrying through all of Kids See Ghosts, the same way you get that kind of heartbroken soundscape on 808s and Heartbreak. We see that maybe not sonically happening on Late Registration, which gets back to what I was saying at form and function. But the function of all of these tracks is to point towards time. Even something like Gold Digger, you have a journey that takes place over years, where this guy knocks a girl up and has to raise the kids, and she gets him for 18 years, and 18th birthday, finds out it wasn't his. Time's still a factor. Drive Slow is all about these different people at different parts of their career and taking your time getting to the next level, not rushing. Kanye, his verse is somebody at the very beginning, not even having a career. Paul Wall, somebody that's gotten some fame and some acclaim, and GLC embodies the voice of somebody that's kind of an elder in the game, that's come up, that has success, and they're providing their take on it. Crack music, I don't think necessarily plays into time. Roses, you get, Closing In on Death, The Grandma, Only Being a Matter of Time. It's not perfect all the time, but there's enough of it going on, especially what we see with Hey Mama, with Gone, Late being the hidden track. There's just enough of time being present on this album in major ways for a lot of tracks, that I think as a concept, it's really strong. But like with the LeBron thing, we see it refined on future albums. And we see him eventually merging narrative and concept on things like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Yeezus, Life of Pablo, to where I think what Late Registration is doing is really cool, and unique in how it approaches it and does it, which is why it stands out on its own rather than just being a lesser version of another album, but doesn't quite reach the heights of the other albums to me. But one of the things that I also like, and why Late Registration goes ahead of College Dropout for me, is not just the concept, but I think Kanye, on just a song-by-song basis, got better as a narrative artist. Like, you look at most of Kanye's songs on College Dropout, and very few of them are able to tell a full story through 3 verses. All Falls Down, it's 3 different kind of short stories that don't necessarily, it's not like one character in a song with a beginning, middle, and end, or one event that's happening, we're seeing the beginning, middle, and end. Spaceship, Kanye's verse is very narrative, but it's only the one verse, and he relies on the other 2 speakers. Same thing happens with a lot of the other tracks, to where you don't really get the same kind of narrative development that we see on Gold Digger, or, Roses, or Hey Mama. I think he just gets a little bit stronger on this cohesive song that has a beginning, middle, and end, and really develops one thought or idea throughout the 3 verses that are just Kanye on those 3 verses. And that's something that he'll go on to continue to refine on Graduation, 808s, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Yeezus, but we really see him take it to that next level on Late Registration from College Dropout, which is why Late Registration goes just a little higher for me. This video is so fucking long. When you say number 8, does that mean that number 8 is the best? No, no. Here's an interesting question I thought of. What do you predict Yandhi to be in your album order list? I predict that Yandhi will be better than Life of Pablo, Ye, and Yeezus. If history is indicative to us of my taste and proclivities and Kanye's development of an artist, I would expect Yandhi to be in the top 3, if not number 1. Here's hoping. Here's really hoping. Danny, you're welcome. Thanks for the question, though I'm sorry it's creating an hour-long video. If you're still watching, thank you. That's very nice of you. Mario, which feature of the very many is your favorite, or do you think is the most important, vital to the album as a whole? Shit. That's a good question. I should have thought about more. I thought I'd just be able to come up with it off the cuff. The most vital to a track or album as a whole. That's really hard. I think the one that's kind of the most popular is Rick Ross on Devil in a New Dress. People often cite that as the best feature that Kanye has had on an album. I think maybe the most vital to a song or album might be Hold My Liquor. As I was talking about earlier, it's really the introduction of the dynamic of the vulnerable side versus the ego side that's concerned with how people look at you and think of you in the public space. So the front portion of Yeezus is Yeezus concerned with how people view him and his reputation in the public space and this presentation of self. And it's this harsher side of him because it's based entirely on the ego. But after this failed revolution he tries to lead on New Slaves, we get the vulnerable portion of him breaking through on Hold My Liquor, I'm In It, Blood on the Leaves, Guilt Trip. And that vulnerable portion kind of is the whole point of the album, to explore that this vulnerability that is feeling is why he presents this insane external shell. And when we get to Bound 2, that he's kind of trying to let that shell go and really have this relationship, but is still, I'm not getting the lyrics from this. The Jerome's in the house, watch your mouth really gets at him still being aware of what people will think of him as he gets into this relationship. So it's a little bittersweet at the end. But Hold My Liquor really is the first time that that dynamic takes center stage on Yeezus, and is such a inroad to finding it. And that's one of the things, the dichotomies between some of the early Kanye albums, some of the later Kanye albums. Kanye was very straightforward in telling us all the details on things. Like All Falls Down tells us exactly what's going on, and what's at stake, what the problem is. Same thing with Spaceship, same thing with Jesus Walks, but showing what's going on is much different. And from My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy kind of onward, actually Graduation onward, Kanye starts to show more. Like a lot of people take Drunken Hot Girls very seriously, but that's showing, that and Barry Bonds are showing the development of ego to this character on Graduation. And Kanye doesn't come out and say like, all this fame is giving me a big head and I'm starting to act like a dick. No, he shows us that's going on. A midpoint example of that would be Kendrick on, I think it's I or You, whichever one he's drunk on To Pimp a Butterfly. On that song, he shows by getting drunk and really expressing this self-hatred and this self-loathing, the form and function of that song really convey that self-loathing. But at the same time, he's telling us all the reasons why he hates himself and loathes himself, rather than showing us the ways in which he hates himself and loathes himself, right? And Kendrick on Good Kid, Mad City and To Pimp a Butterfly really tells more than he shows. Another example of that is the poem that's on To Pimp a Butterfly. At the end, on Mortal Man, Kendrick just straight up explains what the poem means. And all the mystery that was there that we would have had to actively break down and would have had to figure out on our own, he just tells us what the meaning and intent and purpose was of that poem. Kanye never really does that. He has these inroad moments where you need to look at it and be like, oh, why is this here? Why is this doing this? Oh, this connects to this in this way. Oh, and this connects to this in this way. Interesting. Okay, I think these things, it's the same way that you would do if you were watching, Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, or The Shining, or A Clockwork Orange. We're shown these things and not really told what the purpose or intent is, and we have to piece that together through active viewing. Same thing with kind of highbrow books and literature. That's what Kanye is doing here, and that's what Kendrick ended up doing on Damn, which is why Damn ends up being more discussed as good and bad, or I guess viewed as more, I'm struggling to think of the word, probably because I've been talking for an hour. Why people are more split on Damn than on To Pimp a Butterfly and Good Kid, Mad City, because Damn shows more, and some people just don't have the time or patience or like tools for analyzing that album that way to get the most out of it, where To Pimp a Butterfly is a bit more of a passive experience where you're told what's happening and can follow along, where Good Kid, Mad City is even more of a passive experience. So College Dropout and Late Registration still have depth to them, but I think that they're more of that passive listening experience where you can just throw it on and be able to follow along without have to actively sit there and figure out, okay, how's this relate to this? How's this relate to this? How's what happened on Black Skinheads set up New Slaves? How's the outro of New Slaves set up what we get on Hold My Liquor and Guilt Trip and Bound 2? All those things matter, and all these details are how you get the most out of this album, or the most out of Life of Pablo or Ye. Just very different listening experiences. So I think that's why I would put that feature on Hold My Liquor as the most important or vital to the album as a whole, just because it really opens up that dynamic and shows that dynamic for the first time. Favorite? I don't know if I have a good answer for that at this point. Maybe Shake on Ghost Town, because Jesus, the first time I heard that, I got goosebumps, and I still do. Like, I love that outro so much, just from the imagery to the emotion of it. So maybe that. Life of Pablo up top. Answered that. This might be kind of a random question, but what do you think about Kanye's other creative outlets, like the clothing line? Do you own some Yeezys? And when it comes to his music, do you pay attention to the lyrics or rank them based just on the production? I think I answered the lyrics or production question. I like the clothing. I liked Kanye's first fashion runway show. And that was 2010, 2011? At that point, I was a Kanye fan, but not on the level that I am today. I never thought I'd have a Kanye podcast at all. And he had some of my favorite albums, but I still don't know if I would have said, Kanye's my favorite artist when I first saw that show. But I thought the clothes then were better than what other people were saying. And I think going back and looking at them now, they still hold up and are been appreciated more. So I always like when artists branch out and do other things and get to be creative in other ways, because I do think that creativity in one realm leads to creativity in another realm, that you're able to learn from all things. So I think his time in clothing has helped how he develops his music, and working on clothing gives him insight to how he's going to work on music. Likewise, how he works on music gives him insight to clothing or architecture or all the other things he works on, and makes them as fascinating and high level as they are. I actually just got this shirt, the West Lang skeleton shirt. So I'm excited about that. You can I don't know how to pose in the camera, see that. And I do have a few pairs of Yeezys. I have the zebras upstairs. So I was wearing those earlier today. So I'm increasing my collection. I think the 350 V2s are awesome. If I had the money, I would own every pair, just because I think they're that cool and would want to collect it. But I also don't know how my fiance would feel about me owning a dozen pair of the same shoes. But I also think that she would get it. I do. We're watching Throwing Kids See Ghosts on that list. Addressed it. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. At the top, Ye is not his only dud. Ye is just very different, and Ye will be appreciated in time. And then you can't see the last one, but Little Hedgehog said My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy at number 1, with Late Registration also being a 10 out of 10, and Yeezus also being a 10 out of 10. And that does it. So I hit the hour and 3-minute mark. I'm going to end this fast because you don't have to watch any more of me talk, but thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have more questions, by all means ask, and maybe I'll make a part 3, but maybe I'll just write responses. But thank you very much. I hope you're all having a good night or day or whenever you're watching this. It's night for me. It's 12:55 a.m. See ya.